Welcome to Front Porch Politics, conservative conversation for a complicated country. And now, your host, the pontificator of common sense and coffee connoisseur, David Marks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Front Porch Politics podcast. We have the honor today of having Mr. Ken Good on the podcast with us. Ken is the board of directors for the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. He is also an author of Goods on Bail. He has written several articles on what bail reform should look like. Mr. Good, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
I'm doing very well. I hope you're adjusting okay to the craziness of COVID-19 lockdown.
Well, I think cabin fever has taken over across the country.
There is no doubt about that. You know, what's amazing, I actually am a runner, and I like to get out and exercise, and I have found myself upping my game and doing that just because I am a worker also, and I have found that I am getting bored just being at home, so I'm ready to get life back to normal.
I understand. I think people have reacted one of two ways. They've either done that or they've gone to the refrigerator over and over and over, and I probably fall in the latter category.
Well, I have found myself doing that also. So, well, Mr. Good, it is a pleasure to have you on today. One of the things we have learned during this coronavirus outbreak and the COVID-19 is that we have seen where there has been a big push in our country to have inmates released from facilities. And this is not just in Texas, which is your home state, and in other states they're doing this also. Advocacy groups are fighting to have prisoners released. Give me your thoughts on this.
Well, the COVID-19 is not our first rodeo with problems that have gone all the way into the jail. We've had SARS, we've had H1N1. Jails are always fighting tuberculosis and other diseases that are easily transmittable. And so that, even a really bad flu season, we don't close the jails. But what's different this time is we have these, our friends on the other side, these activist groups, that are threatening these people. So we have, I like to call this a perfect storm. We have a virus that actually the complication is you may need a respirator for a couple of weeks. And that can be expensive for counties, for people in the jail. And then you've got activist groups saying, if you don't let people out, we're going to sue you. And they mean it, because they sue if you don't. And it's kind of like, we don't want criminal justice reform, we want criminal justice surrender. And so that's what we're in the middle of right now. And sadly, we have some jurisdictions that are surrendering instead of looking for reforms.
Well, and I noticed in the bill, the HEROES Act, which is a $3 trillion spending bill from Nancy Pelosi, that part of that 1,815-page bill was that they were going to just have immediate release of prisoners who were in prisons because of the risk. And it sounds like to me that there have been plans in place historically where jail systems were prepped, prison systems may have been prepped to keep society safe from those criminals in those systems. There was already a plan in place to treat or to try to treat those who may be sick.
Yes. And, probably the biggest problem we have, like in Texas, is we don't have probably proper treatment for mental health patients, and sometimes our jails are the biggest mental health facilities in that part of the state. And so I think, we have been developing, or the jails have been taking on yeoman's work of doing other things other than just housing criminals. And what we're seeing is that the cost of that is what's really pushing these people who are reforming, or the county, when they're saying that they're wanting to make changes, it's because of the cost. And then you have these other people who are friends on the other side who are saying that these people shouldn't be held accountable because they're poor. It starts out with poor people, and then it goes up to, well, we just want to be fair to everybody, and then it just becomes you have no accountability, and that's where we are now. We shouldn't have any accountability, and we should just let people go. They will say, well, there's studies that show that, incarcerating people doesn't really have an impact on crime. And so, but when you look at the studies, that's one of the things I was doing this morning, is you've got one advocacy group citing a study released by another advocacy group and they're using that as authority for their position. So it's like me saying my brother says this, and that's authority. It's ridiculous.
So they're using circular reasoning to try to accomplish their goal.
That's a really good way of saying it, but yes, they are. They're using circular reasoning. They're just supporting each other's arguments to try to get to the result that they're threatening people to get to.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm a conservative, Mr. Good, and I believe that we do have to have the rule of law in our country. I think that it is what makes our country function. It keeps our people safe. So I have my own personal opinions on the wholesale release of these inmates. I don't think that's a good idea, but you're the expert in this field. You're someone who does this, and you've studied this. You have the legal mind to back that up. So, taking COVID-19's health risk into account, why is the wholesale release of inmates from jails and systems not necessarily a good idea?
Well, it's not a good idea, or worse, it's a bad idea, because it removes accountability. I mean, I don't have any problem with us looking within the jail and saying who has changed, who has made progress, like gotten a GED. I mean, probably the biggest impact on someone's recidivism rate is getting an education or improving themselves in the jail. So if we make find individual examples and we make exceptions for them because we see progress, I'm all for that. But what we're doing is we're doing carte blanche. And as a result, you see stories across the country. We started keeping track, or I started keeping track, and I started saying, okay, well, here's a guy who was rearrested within 37 minutes. And then here's a guy, a new record. He was arrested within 20 minutes. And then here's a new record. A guy commits a new crime within 10 minutes. And it's not just, theft. He's carjacking, strangling an 11-year-old child because the mother won't give him the keys to the car. Within 10 minutes of him being released from jail because they're showing him mercy. We have thrown out.
He should have never been released.
He should have never been released. And we have this example that's just awful out of Houston, where a guy with mental issues has been arrested over 60 times in the past. And he had 2 felony charges currently. He was given 2 PR bonds. We've shown him so much mercy. That's all we've shown him, so that he could go to a mental facility. And he runs out and runs away from the mental facility, and he stabs and kills this 80-year-old woman outside of Walgreens. She's on a cane. All you have to do is push her over, and the police come, and there's a shootout, and they kill him. But this 80-year-old woman should have never been killed. He should have never been out of jail.
Well, that brings me to, I guess, my next question is the public safety. Do you feel public safety is legitimately at risk? Is there a concern that the release of the prisoners are going to, that are charged with these heinous crimes, when we release them, are we putting the public at risk?
Yes, and not just when we release them. When we release them with no supervision. I mean, we're just giving them a PR bond, or in California, they're releasing them with no bond. What we're telling them is, you can do whatever you want. This is your get out of jail free card. If we had reduced their bonds or set reasonable bonds so that more of them could post bonds, they could get out with a bondsman who's supervising them. We make people report to us once a week. I mean, it's kind of like, think of it as they're paying for their own supervision, but somebody's watching them. And more importantly, what no one's thinking about during this time is, how are we going to get all of these people that have just been released to go to court when it's time? We're just building up backlogs, and we already have proven that people released on these methods have a 50% failure to appear rate. That's what happened in Harris County. That's a recipe for disaster. So how are we going to get these people to show up? You're going to get them to show up again when they commit a new crime.
And that was a question that I was going to ask is, we know that, and you've given the good statistics there, that failure to appear rates are going to rise because of this. Mm-hmm. When you don't have accountability, whether it be for paying your taxes or doing your homework if you're in school and you're a student, when there's no accountability there, then they feel like there's just a open opportunity to not appear back in court, or even if they've been temporarily released because of COVID-19, whatever it may be, there's no accountability for them to come back and to finish their sentence, whatever it may be. So
Well, and you would think common sense would take over, but it doesn't, because we have examples of people being arrested, released, arrested, released, arrested, released, and it goes on and on. And, these people are watching. I mean, they're watching and they're saying, well, shoot, they're not going to do anything to me, or they're not going to do anything to me right now. So they're getting a free pass. And so they're listening and they're going, okay, I can go do more stuff. I can go do worse stuff. We have rising numbers of examples of, not just burglary going up, business crime going up because businesses are vacant or were vacant. You've got murder rates going up because people are going, hey, they're not doing anything to me, so maybe they won't do anything to me if I do a little more. It's a sad situation.
Well, and I agree with you 100%. And I think the media misconstrues this because we have seen where they're putting out there that only the low level or the non-risk offenders are the ones being released. But that's not the case, is it?
No. In fact, in California, it's the worst example, because they'll say, oh, we're not releasing dangerous people. But what they're not saying is they had reclassified a bunch of felony crimes as misdemeanor. And now they're saying, well, their felony crimes are down. Yeah, they're down because you've reclassified a bunch of them to be misdemeanors instead of felonies. And, the problem we have, the reality is that we don't have that many people in jail that didn't earn it. And earning it is, your repeat offender. And so the story that we don't want to take advantage of the poor, we don't want to take advantage of the first-time offenders, we wouldn't have this problem if we had a whole bunch of those. We wouldn't be talking about the release of murderers, the release of people who've committed serious crimes. They're doing that because they believe, wrongly, I think, that they need to open up this space, and they're out of fear they're going to be sued. And so they say, well, we're only going to release the nonviolent people. But over time, it's just, they've quit talking about nonviolent because they're releasing violent people as well. And the statistics, the people who keep getting rearrested, show that too. But that's going to get bigger as the more and more people are listening that, hey, there's no consequences if you do something else.
If we looked at it with common sense, which is what I think we are tremendously, it's a superpower in our country now because we don't use it anymore. But if we looked at common sense prison reform, I believe that we could look at that and we could see what we need to do. At the same time, now again, you're on a conservative podcast in Alabama. Of course, we branch out to the country, but the listening audience I have and the opinions I have is that we're sometimes not stern enough on those heinous criminals that we have. We'll put them on death row for life, and there's not accountability there, like you have said. And so they feel like that is an open ticket to a free meal and a bed, and no matter what crime they commit. So it seems to me that in society we're developing, because of this Sioux mentality, we're protecting more the delinquents of society more than we are the honest, good people of our society.
I think that's a good point. I think that's a good point. What we've got are two extremes. We have the advocates that are saying release everybody, don't measure whether they have a criminal history. But then on the opposite extreme, you've got some law enforcement that are saying we're not detaining enough. We need to detain a lot more. And the problem with that is the cost of that is substantial. And, look at the federal system. When they changed their system to allow preventative detention, suddenly their detention rates went way up pre-conviction, and now over approximately 70% who are arrested in the federal system are detained before their cases are completed. So, I mean, if you look at those two extremes, you go, well, the private bail system is not an extreme either way. It's a compromise. It's a middle ground between the two extremes. And when you look at what is common sense, like you said, what does common sense bail reform look like? Well, you got to start with, does it make the system better? I mean, if you're looking at fairness, that's not a measure of whether you're making the system better. In fact, you don't care whether you do damage to the system out of a goal of reaching fairness. And I think saying fairness to try to improve the system is just such a misnomer, because the problem we have in our largest areas is, how do you process large numbers of people quickly and efficiently through the jail? And what these groups, the first thing they attacked was bail schedules, because that allows anyone who can afford to bypass the jail, they can do that. And what these groups don't realize is when you do that, you're overwhelming the magistrate system, and they have no time to determine who to use their discretion on, who not to. We need to get as many people away from the system. If they can afford it, great, so that the magistrates can concentrate on what's left. Because when you set up a process that they can't manage, then they're just going to resort to releasing everybody, which causes forfeiture rates to skyrocket, which causes numbers of pending cases to go way up. Harris County's had pending cases for the misdemeanor courts double in the last year or so. That's a recipe that will shut down your criminal system. And that was before the COVID-19. I'm sure their dockets are going to be doubled again when they start meeting, because in Harris County, they didn't stop filing cases. They just didn't take you to the jail. And so the numbers of pending cases are going to be so high. How do you get people to court? And how does the court function if every time you meet, 50% of the people scheduled to be there don't show up? You can't. And that's why that's one of the reasons why I'm optimistic, because I met with one of these plaintiffs' attorneys who's pushing all these reforms, and I told him, I said, do you even realize what you're doing? You're setting up a system that cannot sustain itself. It will do so much damage to the criminal justice system that it will have to be thrown out. And the problem is, you'll be gone, your friends will be gone, and all the people that oppose what you were suggesting, we'll all still be here, and we'll be the ones fixing what you did. And he thought I was crazy.
The mess you created.
Yeah, he thought I was crazy, and we're now seeing it.
Well, and again, that goes back to not having the common sense. And I know this interview went by so fast, Mr. Good. We have got to get you back on the podcast in the future, maybe in the month of June. If you look at your schedule and you have some time, we would love to have you come back and be on. But before we go, our time's just about up. I would like for you to tell us about your book, Goods on Bail, where people can find that. Give us a little bit of information about where they can reach out for information about you and the book you've written.
Well, Goods on Bail is a practice guide for the bail bond world in Texas. It has the statute. There's 3 different statutory chapters that govern bail, and so it sets out those regulatory schemes and also the case law that interprets them, so that if you practice in that world, either a bondsman or an attorney representing bondsmen, you will have a little summary of our law that's applicable. And there's a whole bunch of law that you think is applicable, but it's been reversed and it's no longer applicable. People who want more information on stuff that I've talked about, they can go to the pbtx.com, which is the website for the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. You can go to our Facebook page. We have a Twitter account. And our blog is updated multiple times a day with new information where we're highlighting bail stories across the country. And if you want to keep up, you can even sign up for our newsletter on our website.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Good, we will definitely put links in our show so the audience can go find information about that. And again, like I said, it has been a pleasure having you on. I feel like that we just saw the very top tip of the iceberg here, that we definitely want to have you back. Maybe we can do a 2-part series next time and let you go into further when you, of course, start seeing more statistics come in. We thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And again, we want you to come back to Front Porch Politics anytime that you would like.
Well, thank you very much. It was my pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
Front Porch family, be sure to go check out all of the links at davidomarks.com. You can also find out more about Mr. Ken W. Good at the website pbtx.com. Also, you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. We have links inside the show notes. And until next time, my friends, may God bless you, may God bless America, and we will see you real soon.
Thank you for listening. For free resources, additional podcasts, and to join the Front Porch newsletter, please visit davidlmarks.com.